Sunday night, just baseball show. Tonight is Sunday, December 15th, and we wanted to get this out as quick as possible. You were going to get the Playing GM tomorrow, the Monday show. We're going to LA, kind of, sort of. I'll be in Milwaukee. You'll be in South Florida, but it's the Dodgers and the Angels on the Playing GM episode. That'll be your typical Monday morning. You get up, you go to work, you listen to that. But we wanted to get you this one right away because Friday and Saturday were crazy on the off-season trade market. We never got the opportunity Friday or Saturday to sit down. We have the opportunity now. We want to get you our thoughts ASAP on the Kyle Tucker trade, on the Devin Williams trade, and on the Jeffrey Springs trade. We also had another free agent signing. So we got all that going on. Jack, Aram, Just Baseball Show, as always, brought to you by BetMGM. Big hip hop news this weekend. Did you see that? Owen Wilson performed Fiend with Travis Scott at a party, and Travis Hunter gave us a 6 foot, 7 foot reference in his Heisman acceptance speech.
Yeah, I saw Lil Wayne there. That was crazy.
That was awesome.
He
And how
doesn't.
he had never heard any Wayne until his fiance put him on. It was like, I listen to it all the
He,
time.
he said he doesn't listen to music. What do you do in the car if you don't listen
He
to music?
he described himself as boring. And I don't think he's boring because
It's
he's
not
awesome
humanly
as a football
possible.
player,
Yeah, you
but
can't be that athletic and be boring. It's just not possible. Like he could
also
be.
that's kind of a telltale sign of being boring, like not listening to music and then not knowing who Lil Wayne is until you get to college.
Yeah, that is wild. But it was funny. The Heisman conversation reminded me a little bit of the Otani MVP conversation. I was like, thank goodness we're not covering college football. I can't do another one of those. Like, oh, but he does both. But oh, the other guy's year in a vacuum is better. He does one thing, and like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we don't have to deal with that.
So you know what it was? It was the Otani Vladdy year. It was that
Yeah,
year where
that's
Vladdy
exactly
was
what I
just
was.
the better hitter.
I was drawing flashbacks of it, and I was like, thank goodness we don't have to compare like apples to oranges that are both like in pristine shape. And like, yeah, I'm good on that. So it was cool to see though. I think they actually did a good job on that whole show. And I hope they do something similar with the Golden Spikes, which is presented by our friends at Chinook Eatery.
Hmm.
I know it's not as big of a spectacle, but I would love for them to make it a little bit more of a spectacle. I think people would be somewhat interested in that with the way I think a lot of these college baseball players are starting to I think transcend college a little bit with I think the interest in the draft being higher than ever. Uh, I think how quickly these guys are moving through the minor leagues. I would love to see a little bit more fanfare, and I know the folks at Chinook would as well, but around the Golden Spikes, and I feel like we might start to see that a little bit more.
I think so. I'm kind of shocked we haven't really gotten an award ceremony for the Wooden or the Naismith in college basketball.
Especially that's another one too. I
It,
agree. Like
it's another one, but like baseball, I feel like this year especially, you had the star power of a Caglione and a Condon and a Bazan. Like if you were able to, and I know that it's tough with regional weekend and all that coming right after, but it's if you can create that like weekend buffer or even do it midweek, because all these guys like their semesters are over at that point.
yeah,
Just get them in the same place, like do it
it'd be
in
so
do it in
cool.
Omaha or something, and
Think
have the
about
ceremony.
think about Langford Skeens and Cruz. Like
Yeah.
how much fun that would have been. So yeah, I hope that's something we see a little bit more of. That's all I was thinking when I was watching that the Heisman ceremony. It actually was one of the few award ceremonies that I'm like, this isn't that miserably dragged out, and this is actually pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm totally with you. And then how about Owen Wilson? How about Lightning McQueen
I
doing
don't have
Fiend
anything
with
on that.
Travis? I think
I
that's
don't have
you don't have a take. That's the one song that I think I'd be comfortable performing in front of the crowd because I can't mess up the lyrics.
one song I'd be comfortable never hearing again, as well.
Man, mine is Turned Down for What by
Uh,
DJ Mustard. That's the
yeah.
one I'm okay never hearing again. But let's talk about Kyle Tucker, shall we? Kyle Tucker is going to the Chicago Cubs to return to Houston. Isaac Paredes, Hayden Wesneski, and Cam Smith, the Cubs' first round pick this year out of Florida State. 4-1-1 on all of these guys. Kyle Tucker is an MVP candidate when he is on the field. He dealt with injury this year. He put up a 4-win season despite playing about 80 games. He is one of the best position players in all of Major League Baseball. Isaac Paredes was terrible for 2 months with the Cubs, but Isaac Paredes was an all-star last year. And Isaac Paredes is a guy that is probably going to make the Crawford boxes his own. Simply put, buy the dip. Hayden Wesneski is a guy that has a very good sweeper. He was acquired from the Yankees, 2 years ago for
Yeah.
Scott Efros in a
Yep.
1-for-1. Wesneski is a guy that I feel like had starter promise, now looks like a good big league swingman. I think he's a good arm to have on your major league roster regardless. And oh, by the way, he's from Houston, Texas. And it was really cool to see the social media reaction from Wisniewski and the Wisniewski family when this went down. And Cam Smith, I'll give you the floor there. This was a steep prospect price as a quote unquote third piece, although it's pretty clear Wisniewski was the third piece.
Yeah, no doubt about that. But also, like, I'm excited to see how the Astros can maybe help unlock a little bit more from Wisniewski. We saw flashes of again, he was a top 100 prospect at the back end, just snuck his way in with the way that things connected for him at the upper levels after the trade. I think the Astros, with the slider that he has and just trying to figure out the right way to go about his fastball, I think there could be some intrigue there. Also, Wisniewski closed out the year really well. You look at the last couple outings that he had, a couple innings, shut out like 4Ks. His stuff was jumping a little bit more. But we talked about the depth kind of needed pitching wise for this Astros team. He is a great option to either help, with the bullpen side of things, or, if Garcia is struggling a little bit off of TJ, or, just some of the other younger guys are maybe banged up or whatever it may be, just a guy that you could definitely plug at least into the 5 spot and feel good about him being able to eat some innings there. So I thought that was a great ad, but I had to sit down and just write a piece. I hadn't had that like itch to just do an instant reaction on justbaseball.com to a trade like that. Usually I'm breaking down the prospect return or whatever. I sat down and was like, I need to write something about why the Cubs need to go all in now. Yeah. And it's not because, the trade was an overpay or anything like that. I don't think you can. I will never call a trade for a superstar, even if it's 1 year of a superstar, an overpay, unless it's legitimately the most egregious thing we've ever seen, which it wasn't, right? I don't think it was at all. But considering how far off the Cubs, I think that's a little dramatic, but considering the Cubs needed several more pieces to get to a point where I think you can say, hey, they're World Series contenders, the only way that trading for a Kyle Tucker for 1 year makes sense to me is not an extension. That was never going to happen. They know that they might bring him back in free agency, but it's not an extension. He's going to test the open market. Why wouldn't he, after what he just saw Juan Soto get, even if he gets half of that? You want to see what you can get in the open market, and I think he has a great shot at getting well over half of that. That side of things, I think the Cubs were well aware of that.
Yeah.
It's the fact that they were able to add a superstar here, and we've talked about it, the Cubs, like, who is their star? Like, they've got it now. But you traded 3 years of a third baseman that you were happy to acquire. I know it was bad for 2 months, but you were happy to acquire less than 5 months ago.
All-star
after an all-star.
Yeah.
You move a depth arm. Wisniewski was never going to be a huge problem there, but also then you move the contingency plan and Cam Smith. And remember, the Cubs knew Matt Shaw was going to be in the big leagues in 2025. Yeah. The Cubs preferred Matt Shaw at second base. That's why they traded for Isaac Paredes, and that's why we heard the Nico Horner trade rumors. Obviously, things change. I think one of the things that changed was Matt Shaw actually looked a lot more comfortable at third base at the end of the year, and then he actually looked good there in the Premier 12, and Mike Scioscia is even gushing about that as well. I know Alex Cohen had mentioned that on X, but still, you're within 5 months of saying, hey, we need to outsource our future at third base. We prefer Shaw at second base, and I know the Cubs prefer him there internally. Now that shifts. So even more of an emphasis, I think, on them going all in right now. When you feel like you can win and you can add a star, you shift things around a little bit and say, okay, Shaw will survive at third. That sounds good. But you didn't just trade your third baseman to the next 3 years. You also traded 6 more years of Cam Smith, who finished the year in Double-A because he was so damn good. He's a number 44 overall prospect for us at Just Baseball. Again, I like the move for the Cubs if it's followed by more moves. It did immediately come with Carson Kelly at catcher. I love that. They just needed a solid big league option while they wait to see what they have with Moises Ballesteros. I think it needs to come with a trade for Jesus Luzardo or a signing of Walker Buehler or Sean Manaea or whatever. If you don't follow this Kyle Tucker trade with more moves, I think that's what defines the trade as a success or a failure, not an extension. That was never going to happen. I think it's what comes after this Kyle Tucker move that makes it a success or not. Look at the Yankees with Juan Soto. I know it sucks that they lost him, but they got to the World Series. I think if the Cubs were able to do something similar to that, even maybe make a run to the NLCS, and it gives them maybe a little bit of an inside track to being able to retain Tucker, then it's 100% worth it. And I think they're going to make that push with the money coming off the books.
And to your point, I think there are different ways to light a fire under a team's ass. And I think you could do it in a negative way or in a positive way. And I think you have examples over the weekend of both. And the negative way, which, you just mentioned the Yankees, I think that is the way. It's like, okay, we lost on Juan Soto. What do we do now? And they're operating with, I'm going to show him that we're the better team in New York. And you do that by paying Max Fried $215 million. You do that by trading for Devin Williams, who is one of the best closers in all of Major League Baseball. And you do it by trading for Cody Bellinger or signing Christian Walker, whatever happens over the next few weeks for the New York Yankees. Like, they will figure out a way to put together a team that can make Juan Soto regret his decision. I think you can also light a fire under a team by doing the positive, which is what the Cubs just did this weekend. And it's okay, let's show our fan base that we're not going to operate like this mid-level that Ken Rosenthal is writing about all the time. Like he's throwing shade at our president of baseball operations consistently. Let's get out from under that narrative and let's push forward. I'm with you. Only Kyle Tucker does not quell that narrative. There are plenty of teams that can trade for a superstar and then call it an offseason and lose that division by 2 games, sneak into a final wild card spot, and lose in the wild card round. That's not a successful season for the Chicago Cubs.
No,
Like, they
not
need to contend for an NL pennant, and you do that with a hell of a lot more than just Kyle Tucker. I'm with you.
no doubt. And Tucker's, the best player that you could have possibly acquired, and is a great start and a springboard. And again, I think that's
It's
extremely
amazing. So
exciting.
what do you do from here? Yeah.
The bullpen. I'm looking at that bullpen. I'm like, that's not a
Right.
bullpen that's gonna get you to the promised land.
And dude, there are attainable bullpen pieces out here. Free agency, like Tanner Scott is sitting on his ass right now. And
Yeah,
how much is that guy going to get? I don't think it's going to be $80 million. I think you can get him for 3 years, 50. Like, I do
maybe
think that that's in the cards. And if not, go the cheaper route.
Minter,
Minter,
Estevez.
Estevez. How about the trade market, man? Doval's still hanging out around there, and I know that they've kind of rescinded that trade opportunity. BS. Like, that wouldn't have come out in the first place. Go make a move. You still have the best farm system in baseball, arguably.
Yeah, 100%. And I was surprised by the Cam Smith move, but again, I get it, because you'd way rather have Matt Shaw right now, who finished the year incredibly well, was the guy in that Premier 12 for Team USA too. Like, he just has hit at every single stop. If he plays a passable third base, his speed and power combination, and it's big league ready right now, it is fantastic. So that is the priority there. And I get it. Win now. You want to have your guy that's going to be available playing third base right now, whereas Smith was at least another year away. Horner now potentially just has that second base spot on lock. Now you potentially hold on to Nico Horner for 2 more years and hope Shaw continues to develop at third. And then if you lose Nico Horner to free agency, you can either decide to address second base and see if Shaw's progressed there, or you can always move Shaw back to second base. But this is also a huge bet on Matt Shaw. And I love that, because he's one of the better prospects in the game. And I think he's earned that. And again, just coming along the way that he has defensively at third, he definitely earned this look. But I also want to talk about the Astros side, because the one thing I did say when we were playing GM for the Astros is it only makes sense for the Astros to trade Kyle Tucker if they are punting on next season. This might be the closest thing to an exception to that. And I mentioned that on X, because it's like there's a few wrinkles to this that are fascinating. So if the Astros retained Kyle Tucker this year, of course they were going to lose him in free agency. That's abundantly clear. They lost Correa for nothing. They lost Bregman for nothing.
So, real quick interjection. What's the total money price tag on Kyle Tucker next year? Like, with what we know now, I think that Kyle Tucker, if he plays 150 games this year, is a $400 million player.
Minimum.
And we've been saying for the last, 2.5 years? I think you've been on this bandwagon with me. Kyle Tucker's a $300 million player. I know I've been saying that for 2 years, and I think you've been there every step of the way with me. A $300 million player 2 years ago is a $450 million player now.
Yep.
That's what happened with the Soto thing.
And he does everything, dude. And he's getting better and better. A fractured shin fluky thing is what threw him off last year. He had a 180 WRC plus through 76 games. He was on pace for an 8-win season. 8. And that guy's been a walking 5-win season the last several years. He's hitting his prime at like 27, 28 years old. I think this guy this year, he's going to play out of his freaking mind there. Yeah. I think he's going to earn himself closer to that 400 plus range, and maybe even could push to 5. Nothing would surprise me anymore. So people might be saying like, well, then why would the Astros trade him? Like,
because they can't pay that. It's
they
one
can't
year.
pay that. And you already lost Correa for nothing. You just lost Bregman for nothing, essentially. And I think the trade pretty much all but sealed that.
Yeah.
And I think if you're Dana Brown, you're looking at it and saying, look, I would love to have Tucker for another year. But if you have an opportunity here to still help your team get better in another area, obviously net you got a little bit worse because you traded Kyle Tucker, but you got better at third base by a lot instead of having to roll out Zach DeZenzo, who I do believe in. Like, you're rolling out a rookie there. Now you have a guy that is catered to your stadium. Isaac Paredes, if he played there was no ballpark that he would have had more home runs in last year than Minute Maid. He would have had 26 there instead of the lowest that he's had in a full season in his career, which he had last year at 19. So even in that down year, quote unquote, he would have had 26. You imagine now playing a full season there, he could easily hit 30. He's under control for 3 years. So not only did you replace third base, you have control there for 3 years. And then you have your number one prospect there and Cam Smith, who, like, this is a putrid farm system. And now you add your number one overall prospect, Cam Smith. So Paredes you have for several years. Cam Smith is now the heir apparent there. Like, you may have just solved third base for the next decade, which is huge considering that, like, Bregman was your third baseman for like the last decade. So that part is massive as well. And then one other point before I forget, they are right up at the CBT. So if they did not move Tucker and were not able to get under that CBT, even the compensation pick that they would have collected from giving him the qualifying offer that he inevitably would have declined after this year, assuming that the Astros kept him, would have been a 4th-round pick. So not only would you because if you're over the CBT, your compensation pick you get back for the QO that gets declined when a player signs elsewhere becomes a 4th-round pick. So they would have only gotten a 4th-round pick for Kyle Tucker if they lost out on him after this year. Sure, they could have maybe moved him at the deadline, but you would have got significantly less as well. Like, this is the only trade I think that would have made close to enough sense where I'm saying, okay, the Astros aren't punting, and they actually did help their situation long term. If you're Dana, of course, the obvious answer is extend him. Dana Brown was never going to be able to do that because that's not how Crane operates. They don't do those mega long-term deals. The only time they do it is if you have Jose Altuve willing to throw you a bone on a 60% discount, essentially. And that's the only time that they're going to, or Jordan on a pre-arb deal, again, at a massive discount. It's the only time they're going to do it. So knowing that you were never going to be able to do that, being able to set yourself up at third base. And by the way, they cleared up $10 million to have more cushion below the CBT. Now they can maybe address first base, address another position. If they move Presley, they got $20 million to work with now. Like, this does create an opportunity for them. I think it limits their ceiling a little bit, but I think we talked about it. If you're really honest about this ball club, knowing that they weren't going to go above the CBT, it's going to be really hard for them to make this team better with the holes that they had. Now at least they can make this team more balanced and they're better long term.
Yeah, I think they are a net slightly negative with this deal, and I think that there is a chance that this, blossoms into a net neutral if Cam Smith is awesome once he gets up. And I'm actually going to take it a step further. You said they have third base covered for the next decade. I think they have the corner infield covered for the next decade because Isaac Paredes, I do think, is going to move over to first base. He's a solid enough defender at third base. But what I think is going to happen with 3 years control is Paredes plays third this year. When Smith is ready after the 25 season, which is, I feel like, conservative considering you mentioned he ended the year in Double-A.
And he's one of my favorite prospects in baseball. His approach is plus. His EVs are elite. Like, yeah, he's going to get there quick.
So when Cam Smith is ready, you move Isaac Paredes to first base where you know he's going to be a good defender. Isaac Paredes is 4 days older than Ben Rice. He's 2 weeks older than Justin Foscue. And he's younger than Darren Baker, Heston Kjerstad, Jordan Westberg, who else? Tyler Gentry of the Royals, like Davis Schneider of the Blue Jays. These are all names that are like just getting started. And this is a guy that's into arbitration. He's 25 years old. He's their next extension. He's their next. How did they get that deal for that guy?
Yeah.
Promise.
Yeah.
This is, I'm with you. I think this is as well as they could have done moving Kyle Tucker.
And, like, of course, you want to keep your superstar, but if I'm trying to set myself up as Dana Brown, like, for the next several years and try to build my situation to be more advantageous, knowing that ownership is never going to allow me to retain my stars unless it's at a discount, this is probably the best possible move. And no other team was going to value Isaac Paredes, maybe besides like, yeah, you could maybe look at but teams that don't need him, like Cincinnati would be another good fit ballpark
Yeah.
wise or whatever. But no other team was really going to have as perfect of a fit for Isaac Paredes than the Astros.
Yeah.
And he does exactly what Bregman did too. And I think that's why some teams are a little bit like tepid with Bregman is just
Yeah.
you put him in another spot. He pulled the ball in the air so frequently and really capitalized on the Crawford boxes. How does he play in another environment? Now you just basically replaced him. And I think I'm not comparing him to Bregman completely, but there are a lot of similar qualities in terms of elite approach, really good feel for the barrel, and pulling the ball in the air that, I mean, I think he can match some of those pretty good seasons that Bregman's had. Of course, no one's going to match those elite seasons that Bregman had, and Bregman gives you a little bit more defensive value there.
Sure.
But on an offensive side of things, again, I wouldn't be shocked if he hits 30 this year. And if he hits 30, like, you got to feel really good because you also got a pitcher that's going to give you value.
Yeah.
And again, you have your number one prospect comfortably. Like, it's not even close how much further ahead Cam Smith is than the next prospect, which is Jacob Melton, probably.
Yeah, you're throwing so much shade at Jacob Melton right
I
now.
like him, but
Yeah, Melton DeZenzo's what, fringe top 100 at this
yeah,
point, or is he
yeah,
fringe of
top
the
100.
fringe? Yeah,
Yeah.
fringe top 100. But yeah, like he immediately gives you your sights set on the future, and I do think Paredes is the next guy that signs that 9-year extension with Houston, and it's like, wow, how did they maneuver that? We talk about Isaac Paredes in 2029, and it's like, damn, that was a mutually beneficial deal. Going back to the Cubs, you mentioned how Kyle Tucker, like that deal needed to be followed by other deals. And they immediately sprung on a catcher. Carson Kelly, 2 years, $11.5 million. Real quick, free agent signing, because it's not like we need to dissect a prospect return or anything. Carson Kelly had, I think, an underrated year last year.
Mhm.
You would not look at him if you were just looking at the names of free agent catchers and say, that's one of the best options that there is out there. I think you immediately went to Kyle Higashioka, but I do think that Carson Kelly is probably a bit better than Danny Jansen. But
Yeah.
Jansen got more money on an AAV basis. Kelly got a 2-year deal. And what this does is it takes one of the worst catching situations in baseball and makes it pretty okay. Miguel Amaya and, who was it? Tice.
Matt
That
Tice.
was the
Matt
catching
Tice.
tandem before this
Yeah.
deal. Now, see ya. It was a very fun couple months with you in theory, Matt Tice. But Amaya to the bench feels so much better than Amaya as your opening day starter. And Carson Kelly having the ability to play 110 games at a high enough level to give you, what did he give him last year? 2.5 WAR over his two teams? Like,
I think it was 2 WAR, but he didn't play that many games. Like he only played, I believe it was 91 games, and I think he only started 80 something behind the dish. So like if he was playing, as much as we expect him to play with the Cubs, it's easy 2.5 WAR season if he's able to match that. That it was his best defensive campaign he's ever had, and he gave him a 99 WRC plus. A catcher,
dude,
that's above average comfortably.
That's what I want if I'm the Cubs, because I'm looking at a tandem of Amaya and Tice that would have been down there with any catching tandem in Major
Would
League
have been
Baseball.
brutal.
Like,
Would have
would
been
have been
brutal.
horrible. This makes a horrible situation a little bit better. And this also buys you a ton of time to figure out if Ballesteros can actually catch.
Yeah, which is the important part too, right? Because I think at this price point, if Ballesteros has this defensive epiphany and it comes together for him, he can be up next year. But Carson Kelly at that price point is still a very affordable and fine backup. You mentioned the Higashioka deal. Like, I mean, we're looking at a Carson Kelly who was, 63rd percentile in blocks above average per savant. Framing wise, well above average.
Give me
Like,
the bubbles, man. Give me the
I'm looking at
percentages.
that's the
So
only
much
thing.
red.
That's the only thing. The catching stuff, I will absolutely look at the bubbles because, like, there's no way I'm gonna have any other specific intel. The catching stuff is where I look at the bubbles, and like he's well above average across the board there. Like, that's a guy that you'd be thrilled to have as a backup. But
Yep.
worst case, if he's your starter again and you have to ease Ballesteros in, that's also great. So I love the signing, and I literally had it in the piece, and then I had to update it like 2 hours later because they signed him right after I said like the Cubs have to go all in. Carson Kelly wasn't the all in move, but you could not have gone into the season with that catching situation
No.
after trading for Kyle Tucker. Like that was the first thing. Next is you need another starter and you need to address that bullpen because like Porter Hodge was awesome, but they need some guys that have experience in high leverage.
No doubt.
And I expect them to go get that. Eli Morgan was nice to add, but you need a
Yeah.
guy with experience in high leverage, maybe two.
I think the way that I was putting it via text about Eli Morgan was I think they added a very good seventh inning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Porter Hodge is a pretty good eighth inning and a very good seventh inning. I want to find a ninth inning. Like
Yep.
they don't have a ninth inning in that bullpen right now. Let's go find a ninth inning. Is that free agency? Is that trades? That remains to be seen. I would assume free agency because it seems like they have some money to spend here.
Yeah. Especially given that their best player that they just added now, yes, he's $16 million this year, but they're going to move Bellinger. They're going to have to eat some of it, but they will
Yeah.
clear some sort of money there. And if they move Seiya Suzuki as well, they'll probably be able to remove all of that money because 18 million for what he does offensively is more than affordable. So they're going to have some wiggle room, but they already have some anyways.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what they do.
Now, one last thing on the Cubs. Was it Nightingale that tweeted out the Luzardo, Owen
No, then
Casey
was it
thing?
Bruce Levine?
Bruce Levine, yeah, Bruce
Levine?
Levine is 670 to score. He's been around Chicago for a while. Casey feels really steep for Luzardo with a bunch of injuries.
Yeah,
Triantos was the other name that he threw out, and he
they
almost
don't need
mentioned
another one of those
Triantos and
guys.
Casey like interchangeably. It was like, yeah, they want one of. There's a huge difference between Owen Casey and James Triantos.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And Triantos is a good player, but Owen Casey has a chance to hit 40 home runs if it all
Yeah.
comes together, right? Some of the best EVs in the minor leagues, and he held his own as a 21/22-year-old in AAA.
So I guess the question is, do you hang up the phone if you're Jed and you have Bendix asking for Owen Casey for Jesus Luzardo?
I don't think you hang up the phone because I think it's steep. I agree, but a healthy Luzardo is a difference maker, and upside wise, he can be an absolute monster. I think you'd have to get the Marlins to attach maybe some bullpen help or things like that. And maybe they can find a middle ground there,
Yeah.
but. Like a Calvin Fauché had a good year last year. That you could be another guy that just helps bolster that bullpen a little bit. But like I'm with you. I don't think they need to do that, right? Like they could absolutely give the Marlins a strong offer without parting with their, one contingency plan if they're not able to bring back Tucker,
Right.
and two, just a guy that could end up filling in the DH spot is also the contingency plan to Ian Happ when he's off the books. Like
Right.
Casey's a cheap and big league ready nearly option there that I think just doesn't make too much sense for them to trade. And they have so many other intriguing prospects, even like a Jefferson Rojas, who's a top 100 guy for us in the middle infield. Marlins are collecting middle infielders right now, like Infinity Stones, which makes
Yeah.
sense. They haven't had any for years. Like there's definitely ways that I think the Cubs can put an offer together that allows them to keep Casey and still is too good for the Marlins to pass on.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, two more trades to go over in this Sunday night episode. Devin Williams is a New York Yankee, and we talk about, really ponying up after you lose out on Soto. The Yankees acquired Devin Williams for Nestor Cortez, Caleb Durbin, and they essentially pay Devin down, or pay Nestor down, pardon. $2 million cash goes from the Yankees to the Brewers as well. So again, Devin Williams to the Yankees for Nestor Cortez, Caleb Durbin, and $2 million. Steep, steep for Devin. My immediate reaction to this was you're overpaying for an elite closer, one of the best closers in all of Major League Baseball. What's the price tag? I think it's lower than this.
Yeah. Well, this is here's I think the big variable here. What do you value Nestor Cortez at this point?
I
Because
saw I saw baseball trade values valuing him as
I asked
greater
you.
than Devin Williams, which was hilarious.
Oh God, I asked you, not that, not that. I don't even know what to call it.
Yeah, but
I'm so
I
glad it's
am that
behind a
machine.
paywall now. I'm so glad it's behind a paywall, but like even then, they still tweet them out, and I still have to see them. They had. We'll get to the Springs trade. That's where it just popped up on my feed most recently. They had Joe Boyle valued as essentially the same as Jeffrey Springs, so it was a
Oh,
massive overpay
we
by the Athletics.
we can't be doing that.
I can't do it with that site. Please don't ever. Well, now it's again behind a paywall. People aren't tagging me in like the mock trades that make sense to
Disney
them now
Score.
because it matches to a T on there. But please, like, don't get me started on
That
that.
NBA trade machine still on ESPN? If you're asking me, I think it's entirely dependent on how his flexor is doing.
And that's the variable there, right? So, I saw a video of him throwing already again, and then we saw him throw at the end of the year. There's a lot of risk there, obviously, in terms of health. So, that I think knocked down the value some. But I was also surprised that they had to pay him down by 2 million as well, considering that Devin Williams is not the smallest ARB number in the world. Like 1 year, 8 million, isn't that like what it is for Nestor? They had to pay that down.
Yeah, it
Like
is
that's
kind of
kind of
crazy that
surprising to
they had
me.
to pay it down.
But regardless, I really like the move. I'll start with the Brewers side. I like it a lot for the Brewers.
Yes.
This staff, like the upside that you're getting here, like I saw so many replies calling Nestor Cortez overrated. What no one thinks Nestor Cortez, at least I'm just going to speak for what my perception is here, is like Nestor Cortez's season last year. I know it's not as good as what we saw him at his peak, but what he was last year, I think, is what you can count on him being when he's healthy. Sure, there's some blow up starts here and there, but I think you look back at the end of the year, and it's a high threes, and just a solid, reliable arm that doesn't walk a ton of guys, and I think gives you more quality starts than not. Is it going to be the 2.440 RA that we saw in 2022? Probably not. But when he's healthy, I think he's good for a mid to high threes. He
Yeah.
clearly just is able to get the most out of his stuff, and he when he's on, like, can give you a really dominant outing here and there where he gives you flashes of more. But I think for this rotation, we always talk about irons in the fire, right? Because there's always going to be injury risk in any rotation.
Yeah.
But if you're going to have, Brandon Woodruff in there, you definitely need either a reliable arm or an upside play that, could also be hurt. And then I'd probably want another one of those guys as
Right.
well. But like it was a big drop off after Peralta, Woodruff, Tobias Myers, and your Aaron Savali and who? So like now you look at a rotation that it's Peralta. You hope Woodruff is healthy. Tobias Myers, obviously, it looked great last year. And you had Cortez now there as your third or fourth option. Like that feels a lot better. And again, they don't need Nestor to be a frontline guy. They just need Nestor to be what he was last year, to be honest. If he's a 3.77 with 174 innings, I think the Brewers made out great. I think even if he's a 3.8 with 150 innings, they made out great because they needed a starter. We don't need to question their ability to put together a bullpen. We know they can do that, and we'll
Yeah.
get into that in a second. But like they needed a starter, especially a left-hander with Gasser on the shelf as well, Tommy John, early last year. I love the move for them. And Caleb Durbin's one of my favorite, sneaky prospects in the game. I think at the very least, lefty destroyer, super utility, can play everywhere. That was a guy that I said would have been the 1-1 pick if the Yankees didn't, in the Rule 5, if the Yankees didn't add him to the 40. Of course,
Yeah.
they added him to the 40 after what he did. Just adds to that speed and dynamic ability of this lineup. I love how he fits in as well, too.
Yeah, and we'll get to playing the close your eyes and look at the infield game in a moment, but in terms of Nestor, I'm totally with you. I close my eyes and I see 170 innings, 160 innings, let's call it, at a 3.75 ERA, and that's exactly what they need in this rotation. And we were begging for them to find somebody to fill innings, and they found somebody to fill innings, and I think really good innings because
Yeah.
there are times where I turn on the TV and all of a sudden we're in the sixth with Nestor Cortez. I think that he can give you 6 efficient innings pretty much every time he steps on the rubber. And
Yep.
that's all you want in Milwaukee right now.
Yeah.
Durbin is a fun get and a sexy get. And if you didn't know about Durbin, you're not listening to the call up because he was all over the Arizona Fall League episodes. Caleb Durbin stole 29 bases in the Arizona Fall League,
So
29
something like that.
bags in 25 games or something like that.
Yeah.
29
And
for 30 in the stolen base department. Durbin is an unreal speedster. He can also, like, you'll fill in on the profile here, but I'm just thinking about an infield where you keep Joey Ortiz at third, you move Terang to short, and you know that he can handle shortstop no problem. Durbin can play second, and if they do end up moving Reese Hoskins, because I know there's a lot of dialogue around that right now, Tyler Black plays first, and you might have the grittiest infield in Major League Baseball there.
And also, I think probably the best base stealing infield
Yeah.
as well. The Brewers are going to lead Major League Baseball in stolen bases next year. Like, no doubt in my mind. I don't know what the record is for like most players with 20 stolen bases. I think they're going to break it next year, like whatever that is. Chorio's going to steal 20. If Yelich is healthy, he's a walking 20. Frelick will steal 20. Terang stole 50 last year. Blake Perkins stole 20. If Tyler Black's playing enough, he will steal 20. Durbin will back into 20, and like Ortiz is still a guy that could also steal 20. He had 11 last year, but I think he could tick up for more. They can mix and match any way they want to. You could make the case for keeping Terang a platinum glover at second base. Ortiz is still a plus defender at shortstop, and then you could platoon, Black and Durbin at third, or
Yeah.
or Oliver Dunn is also interesting there. I think it makes more sense to go about it the way you said, but I
Yeah.
have seen some reports like, oh, they might want to keep Terang at second. The beautiful thing is they have options now, even more so, which I think is really, really fun. And they needed, I think, another just right-handed bat to spell, some of the left-handed heaviness that they can have at times. And Durbin, like I said, mashes lefties when he's locked in, but like also just a guy that I just think can just hit in general. He pulls the ball in the air consistently. He has a great approach, and when you think about what he has done consistently in terms of at the upper levels, walk more than he struck out,
Yeah.
sneaks those balls out to the pull side where I think it's going to play up in Milwaukee. Like this is definitely a guy that I think was one of the more overlooked and underrated guys in that Yankee system. We talked about it a lot even before the fall league. So I love that fit for them. And I think it really helps them lean into the speed and dynamic ability there. So I love the trade for them. But, on the flip side, the Yankees, like they needed big splashes and, they need high impact players. And, obviously a dialed in Devin Williams, like this guy has a career ERA. Is it in the ones? Like at the end of the day, like when he's healthy, I know he was hurt last year with the back thing, came back. I know the playoffs kind of fresh in everybody's mind. He had a 1.25 ERA last season in 21 and 2/3 innings. And his career numbers are a joke. Like it is ridiculous. A 1.83 ERA in his career. People can talk about the two pitch guys in the postseason, blah, blah, blah. When he executes, no one's hitting him. And they don't need him to be like the clear cut closer all the time. They still have Luke Weaver. There's another guy that can pick up the ninth when needed. They still have other guys that I think they're comfortable going to in high leverage. It just gives them another big swing and miss, elite high leverage arm. So it's hard to knock it for the Yankees. Also, Nestor Cortez was kind of a luxury for them, right? Like
Yeah.
they still very clearly want to address the rotation in other ways. They added a lefty already in Max Fried. Like it's Cole, Fried, Rodon, Heel, and they still have to have Stroman and Schmidt in there as well. Like Nestor was going to have to really force his way into that rotation anyways.
Yeah.
So, and then Caleb Durbin, like I love him. I definitely think he's a guy that could have actually given them meaningful at bats and fill it in different spots. But the Yankees can also address, those positions with the money that they didn't spend on Juan Soto, which seems to be their plan anyways. I think if they emptied the tank on Juan Soto and didn't have a lot more money to work with,
Yeah.
then it would have made a lot more sense to have a Durbin at the minimum. But now it's not as needed.
Definitely. Batting average against Devin Williams in his career. What is it?
I don't want to undershoot it, but 180.
156.
Jeez.
Opponents are hitting 156 against Devin Williams in his big league career. And Devin Williams has totaled 235 and 2/3 innings in his big league career. So not only is it that 1.83 ERA, but opponents are hitting a $1.50 against him, which is absolutely insane. I'm with you. There's not much left to fill in on the Yankee side. They get an elite closer to throw in front of Luke Weaver, and Weaver is an elite eighth inning now. I will say this. This opens the door for the next great Brewers closer. It was Hader, and it was Devin, Craig Yoho, and Jacob Mizorowski. One of them is going to be next, and one of these cats is going to be an all-star closer. That's just what they do. Who do you think it is? I could see them fully committing to the Mizorowski thing. Like, hey, you know
I
what?
think this.
You couldn't throw strikes as a starting pitcher. You
Yeah.
looked elite as a reliever. You have top 50 prospect in baseball pedigree as a starting pitcher. Let's make you nasty.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think they're going to lean into that with DL Hall too. That's what the Nestor Cortez trade said to me as well. And I love DL Hall's stuff, but it definitely looks subdued when he was starting, even in AAA. When we saw him in relief with the Orioles and he made some tweaks, I thought he looked fantastic. I think they're going to put DL Hall in that bullpen. So you have Hall now getting, everything out of his stuff as a lefty in there. And then I think you have to do it with Mizorowski now. You're going to waste so many bullets in AAA trying to develop him as a starter when you could have him in the big leagues tomorrow, which they were almost going to do, right? Like they
Yeah.
were really experimenting with that to potentially bring him up at the end of the season, decided not to. But like I think we've seen enough now to just come away with if Jacob Mizorowski is going to, make an impact at the big league level, at least in the next couple years, I think it's as a reliever. He could always, make the move back to the rotation. We're seeing so many guys do that now in their later 20s, even.
Yeah.
But I think Mizorowski, instead of wasting those bullets in AAA and stretching him out and doing all these things, like this is a guy that sits 97 as a starter with elite extension and just wizard stuff. It's closer to triple digits as a reliever. Like he will overwhelm big league hitters immediately. Trevor McGill was elite out of the bullpen as well. Jared Koenig was also fantastic. Piamps is solid. Brian Hudson had a 1.73 in 62 innings. This could be the best bullpen in baseball if the young guys do what I think they're capable of doing too. And Nick Mears turns the bubbles into a lower ERA. Like, I mean, this bullpen could be as elite as they come, and they subtracted Devin Williams.
Yeah, I gotta find the text that I sent you about Mizorowski. I sent you every imaginable metric when it came to his four seam fastball because his first relief appearance in AAA came against Indianapolis, and I was watching it like we're seeing something we don't see often whatsoever, and it was like 98 at 2650 RPMs, and the
Yeah,
vert
it
was
was
insane. The
comical.
extension was next level. Like everything about it, it was a near perfect four seam fastball.
People throw out outlier. This is the definition of an outlier fastball. Like
Yeah.
definition. And by the way, you know what opponents hit against? What do you think opponents' batting averages were against him as a reliever last year?
As a reliever, the sample couldn't have been any more than 15 to 20 innings.
It
Was it
was, I don't know how many innings it was 56 plate appearances.
56 plate appearances? Okay, I'll say opponents got 9 hits against him in 56 plate appearances.
Four.
Good.
They slashed 085, 232, 149 with a 34% strikeout rate and a 57% ground ball rate.
Okay. So I think Mizorowski's the answer. Craig Yoho's changeup is the best pitch in minor league baseball. That's been pretty well documented on this show. Craig Yoho, a guy that was a position player at Houston, then pitched for 1 year at Indiana. Brewers found him, and all of a sudden he was the best reliever in minor league baseball last year. And then you have DL Hall added to the fold, on top of a Trevor McGill, who could absolutely close out games for Milwaukee next year. A Jared Koenig, who Peter loves. For some reason, like he's the president of the Jared Koenig fan club. Joel Piamps is awesome. Brian Hudson is 6'8" and gross. And then you've got, Nick Mears, like you mentioned. Abner Uribe. Like, we'll see what happens with him.
Yeah, if he decides to just like be poised out there a little bit, yeah, I mean his stuff is outrageous. Like
This is super pen caliber stuff. That
Uribe can run it up to 102 with
Yeah.
crazy movement and everything. The last thing I'll say is the Yoho changeup. Opponents at 142 against it. There's no pitcher in baseball with more separation horizontally between his slider and changeup. I think it was like legit like 50 inches. And I forgot to mention it. Forgot to ask Griff about it when he came on the show a couple days ago or like a week ago now. Definitely go check that episode out. But when I was visiting him in Nashville and catching that series, he worked a 3-2 walk against Yoho, and I was like, Yoho threw that changeup, and it was disgusting, and it missed by like 2 balls. And I was like, dude, how did you spit on that? That was insane. And he goes, I was never swinging.
Yeah.
Like that's you have to do that essentially. That's the Yoho. If you swing, you're not going to hit it. Opponents at 142 against it, and as the year progressed, they got worse and worse and worse. 47% in zone whiff rate against that. So think about it. The average hitter had a 53% in zone 52.6% in zone contact rate against his changeup. You have no shot.
I was thinking about who we talked about Yoho with recently, and it was Carson Williams,
Carson
the Rays
Williams
prospect on the call.
I think he said the same thing.
Yeah, he said I was just ditching it. Like I wasn't even going to try on that pitch. Which, like, I mean, you have a guy that's a top 10 prospect in baseball saying that. Like, you have something crazy going on. So, yeah, Mizorowski, Yoho, one of them is going to be an all-star in the next 2 years. I'll make a bet with anybody on that. Two more trades, real quick. Jeffrey Springs is going to Sacktown. Springs goes from the Rays to the A's. The return, well, Springs was attached with Jacob Lopez, reliever. The return was Joe Boyle, the stuffy starter slash reliever that can't really find the strike zone, but the stuff is out of this world. Jacob Waters, a reliever. Will Simpson, a first baseman, and a comp A pick. So the 36th overall pick in the 2025 draft. A's are frisky, man. Like I'm digging this level of quasi buy-in from the A's right now. With Sevy and Springs at the top of that rotation, I do think they need one more to be somewhat serviceable in the starting rotation. But man, like they're kind of putting complementary pieces on this team to get around this lineup, and that's all you can ask for with a team that whose owner hates them. I think I'm not sure.
Yeah, where'd all this money come from? Especially considering that they're going to a stadium where
Who knew that
it's not.
renting was better than buying?
Yeah, right. Wow. I mean, you move to a smaller stadium where you're probably not going to be able to fill as many seats, even though they didn't fill many at all. But you're capped in the seats that you can fill. And wow, they've got all this money. If they did this last year, I guarantee you they would not have been in the bottom of the barrel attendance wise. I can guarantee it. They actually probably would have been pretty decent. We actually saw that on several occasions when they were semi-competitive, how people actually showed up and they were far from the bottom of the barrel in terms of attendance. I'm not just going to rehash all that, but I just
Yeah,
wanted to. It's just convenient timing for John Fisher to now have some money to spend here
yeah,
as he gears up for Vegas and gets everything approved and endears himself to all of those folks out there with the politics that goes into getting a stadium and everything.
yeah.
From a baseball perspective, we've talked about it. Like the second half, this offense was really good. Yeah, Brent Rooker is one of the best power hitters now in the game, which is crazy to say, but he really is. Hit 39 home runs, hit 293. But like Lawrence Butler's second half, where he looked like a well above average big leaguer. JJ Bleday looking like a really solid piece. Shea Langelier is hitting 30 home runs, and like the offense is going to be better in this ballpark where the ball's going to fly more, and it's not Oakland,
Yeah.
where it's really hard to hit there. But I think that even made it more important to get some arms that, won't get destroyed. And now they have both Severino and Springs. Like Springs was good when he came back. He made 7 starts at the big league level after coming back from TJ, and he had a 3.27 ERA, 26% strikeout rate, 8% walk rate. I mean, the guy was a walking quality start in those 7 games. Like almost every single start was quality. So from there, I'm like, he's only going to get better the further removed he is from Tommy John. I know he's 32, but I think he's going to, you see the velo tick up a little bit more again. Like much needed, just solid arm for them. I still think they need another one or two to add because it drops off real quick to like a JP Sears or a
Right.
Joey Estes or a Mitch Spence. But they are going to get Ken Waldichuk back at some point this coming season. I still think he could be a solid back end arm. The bullpen is actually pretty decent. Of course, you have Mason Miller. Like if they go get another arm or two, this team could absolutely be that fun young team that hangs around the wild card race, I think late into the season.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. And on Tampa's side, Boyle, like I think Boyle is one of those guys that everybody in baseball is going to look at and say, "Oh, the Rays are going to fix him and he's going to be awesome." I don't know. He can't throw
Uh,
strikes. Like he hasn't
uh,
thrown strikes in Cincinnati or in Oakland to this point. So, what makes you think that he's going to be able to throw strikes in Tampa? Kyle Snyder? Like, we'll see. But Boyle
Magic
is not
dust.
Tyler Glass now.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to sprinkle some magic dust. It is a fun arm to get though, and a good
Yeah.
upside piece. The best, no matter what the trade machine says, the most coveted piece in this deal was the Compe pick because that gives them a ton of. I mean, they now have 4 picks, I think, in the top 40, if I'm
Damn.
not mistaken.
And what does that do for
The
your
Rays.
total money? Like that does a ton for
they
your
they
total
now
money.
can do whatever they want in the draft. Like
Yeah.
they're gonna add a ridiculous amount of talent. Like that really pushed their pool to a point, their bonus pool where they're gonna be able to do whatever they want. Then
See,
you add a Joe Boyle still to that, who could still be a really. I think they're gonna get Boyle to a point where he's a really good reliever
yeah.
and he throws enough strikes to be a really good reliever. I don't. he's not going to sprinkle some magic fairy dust and be a lights out starter for them. I think he's going to be a good reliever that relies on two pitches, and they're going to find a way to keep him around the zone enough to be that.
Yep.
But even then, I don't think it's going to be high leverage. It's going to be more of that seventh, eighth inning guy. But that's great. Like they love collecting those types of players, and they've done that in multiple of these deals now. And I think from the Rays perspective, like Springs, very expensive. On the 1 year deal at this point, and on top of that, like they don't really need him. Like you look at the rotation, it's McClanahan, Taj Bradley, Pepe out, Littell, Shane Baz, and then you got more on the way potentially. I don't think he was much of a necessity for them. Ian Seymour was awesome last year.
Yep.
Yaniel Correa is not far away.
Trevor Martin's not far away. He can't
Trevor
be.
Martin's, yeah, they've got guys. So I'm not too worried about the subtraction there. And what's the exact amount that Springs is owed?
It's not like egregious because it was an extension and it was a friendly extension. But it's
Pulling it
worth
up
it
right
$10
now.
million, I think.
Yeah, so it's 10 and a half. I mean, it's a good deal given the pitching market.
Yeah.
But again, we're talking about the Rays here, right? So to clear up 10.5 million for the Rays this year, and then it's 10.5 million next year, and then it's a $15 million club option in 2027. I think it's great for the A's to have an arm like Springs with 3 years of control. If Springs is a high threes to low fours ERA, you're probably still picking up that 10.5. And when he's on, he's much better than that. We've seen that. So the money is not really, I think it's good overall, to be honest. So that is actually less than I thought it would be. But again, still for the Rays, when you can plug in starters significantly cheaper than that, of course they're going to they're going to want to move that 10.5 that was staring them in the face. There's also a lot of escalators in those deals. That like between each of these years, if he hits X amount of innings, like it goes up and up and up. 2025 and 2026, like if he pitches more than 325 combined innings, he gets 1 million. 320. Yeah, so it goes up and up from there. But it is interesting. I think it's a great get for the A's overall, and again makes this team a little bit more serious.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And I will say Tampa, I think the Cubs may have the best farm system in baseball right now. Tampa is my favorite farm system in baseball right now. And the fact that they can do whatever they want in the draft will make them even scarier. So buckle up. The Tampa Bay Rays are here for the next 8 to 10 years. I'm sorry to inform everybody, but sometimes money does not always win. And I think Tampa, I think they'll get theirs in the next decade. And every team is going to want to do the Rays thing.
I can't wait till they win one because I don't want it to I don't want to fully incentivize like the don't spend and you can win one. But I also think that there's so many people that just immediately dismiss the Rays way and say, look, they've never won a World Series. Right. Once you get to the playoffs, again, it's a crapshoot. Like you just got to get there as consistently as possible. I don't think that there's a limitation in the Rays system that causes them to come up just short. You maybe could say experience and continuity. Perhaps that could be what has them coming up a little bit short, but I don't know if that's what it is. Again, like a couple balls bounce a different way and they win one, a few years back, but I think they're going to get theirs. I agree. And it'll probably be in the next 3 to 5 years. Cause I think the next wave of talent that they have coming up is crazy. Combined with the young controllable guys they already have up there, they're going to be in a good spot for a while.
No doubt. Last trade that we got to go over. Real quick, Jake Berger goes from Miami to Texas. And this was one that I think surely flew under a lot of radars, but Jake Berger went from Miami to Texas for Max Acosta, Eshedri Vargas, and Brian Mendoza. Is there much to unpack on the Marlins trade return? I don't know. He hit 29 homers, Berger did, for Miami last year, and he goes to Texas. He will likely fill Texas's DH spot. He can pinch, he can pinch in. You pitch in on the corner infields if you need, like first, third, whatever. He's a great clubhouse guy to add, and I know that Skip recently took that front office job in Texas. I'm sure that had something to do with this.
Not a coincidence at all. That Skip took that job, and not long after, you've got Jake Berger in a Rangers uniform. Look, from a pure baseball perspective, I get it, right? This is a guy that's torn his Achilles twice, dealt with an oblique thing last year, but he has 4 years of control. But at the same time, could very easily get hurt again, and then you're going to lose your opportunity to get any prospects back. The return is kind of light, but Maximo Acosta was once a high-prized international free agent and had the best year of his career and was added to the 40-man by the Rangers because of how good he looked, this past season. But I think you're looking at, average, regular, most, at the best case scenario, probably a bench piece, kind of more subdued version of that with a Shedry Vargas and then kind of a depth arm as the third piece. But
Yep.
they did get prospects back, and again, the Marlins just want to stockpile prospects in that regard. I love the fit for the Rangers because he's that kind of that insurance policy to Josh Young, who's consistently been hurt. In a perfect world, you're not playing Jake Berger at third. He's not the best defender there. But the
Yep.
fact that you just have another guy that can get by there and can give you plenty offensively, that's great. You also have a guy that there's some rumors that they may move Nathaniel Lowe. If they do that, now you have, Jake Berger there as well. That can play first.
For
But
sure.
I also just think he can pretty much grab that DH spot and give them plenty of power and offense there. Of course, the clubhouse side of things as well.
Yep.
But for the Marlins side, with 4 years of control, I just think they could have held on to him for another year.
Yep.
Had a clear leader, like he is the guy in that clubhouse, like him and Jesus Luzardo. But like after every game, just like gassing the guys up, recapping the win, like things like that. This is a young team that I think could have used a guy like that for another year. But I think that's the difference with the way that Bendix and I think the Rays in general will
Their
approach it, and that
assets.
might that might
Yeah.
be the argument about why the Rays model may come up a little bit short. The
Right.
devil's advocate would be that it's more about the numbers and what's on the field than some of those things beyond the box score, and I can understand that. But this is one of those spots where I think a Burger, his loss will be felt on a
Yep.
young team that I think is, especially if Luzardo's expected to go as well, a young team that doesn't really have that clear cut, clubhouse guy leadership thing. And, it'll be interesting to see how the Marlins, come together in that regard.
No doubt. All right, that was your Sunday night trade episode. Gave you an hour. Tomorrow's episode is going to be a little bit shorter, but we are playing GM for the Dodgers and the Angels. Everything you need is in the episode description. If you like this, please be sure to rate and review wherever you social media. We're there. Go give us a follow and some great merch added as well. Check that out at justbaseball.com. We will talk to you guys tomorrow. Same duo.